Michael Steinberg. What's up, man?
Hello.
What's going on? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Cannot
Yeah,
complain.
I could imagine. Tell me about you just got back from your honeymoon, right?
Yeah, we were in like the Canadian Rockies, the like Banff and Jasper region a month ago, which is actually perfect timing because there are like really bad forest fires in Jasper right now.
Okay.
So if we were
Where's
going now,
Jasper
we would
relative to
not have been
Banff?
able to go. Um, I'm even though I've been there, not an expert, but like a little bit northwest of Banff.
And it's a town or it's another like nature like destination?
So Jasper itself is a town, but there's also I think there's a Jasper National Park,
Hmm.
as well. We only went to one thing in Jasper and we stayed overnight there. We went to a lake called Moline Lake, which was beautiful. We actually got there late, but was still able to get on the boat. Um, but yeah, it was gorgeous. We went to a place called like Spirit Island, um,
Okay.
and yeah, I mean, all the water there in Banff, Jasper, all around that area is like really, really blue because it's all glacial fed water.
That's so funny.
Um,
I was actually about to say that when I was living in Seattle, we went north to the I think it was the Cascades National Park, and they have all these parks also, all these lakes that are just glacier. How does that work? The ice melts into the ice melts, and then the color and then the water changes colors because of the contact with the ice.
so according to the guides that we had, a couple of people talked about this. It's like it picks up the sediment from the rock when it's melting, and it's the sediment that causes it to turn that color. And also, apparently, you're not supposed to drink it for that same reason because it is a bit of a laxative, from what I understand.
Oh, really? I heard you weren't supposed to drink it. I didn't know why. They never told me. They never told us why, rather.
Yeah, I think it would
How'd you
put you
how'd
out
you
of
how'd you
commission for
decide
a
to go
couple
there?
days. It was on Randy's bucket list for a while, and we both love nature. We both love seeing beautiful things, and it was definitely gorgeous. Like we became desensitized to just like seeing mountains in our background for a week.
Isn't that crazy how that works? Where like it's the most incredible thing in the entire world, and then once you're there for like more than like half an hour or an hour or two, you're like, all right, well, I guess it's just part of like the landscape now. It's just
Yeah, we were
what.
just like walking through town, and then there were just like mountain ranges in the background, and we were like, when we're in Philly, we're gonna miss this, but for now, it's
Yeah,
just like, oh, another mountain.
it's so cool. It's so cool. It's so cool. I heard incredible things about Banff. How far did you flew there or you drove there?
We flew into Calgary, which is I think what most people do. Although
Yeah.
I guess you could do like Vancouver, Edmonton if you're making like a bigger trip out of it. But we flew into Calgary. Uh,
You flew into Calgary and what? Sorry.
Here, wait. Okay, yeah, it said the recording stopped. You may want to repeat that last question you had.
Yeah, I said you flew into Calgary and what? What happened? Where'd you go from there? Hmm. Hang on, one more time. Um, okay, we'll try this one last time. Flew into Calgary, and what's the plan from there? How'd you go from there? You rented a car?
Um, yeah, so we rented a car through an app called Turo, which is kind of like Airbnb, but for car rentals.
Mm-hmm. I heard
So
cool
you
things about
rent
that.
it
What kind
from
of car did you get?
someone. It was just like an old Toyota, I forgot what it's called, Range Rover. It was a Toyota SUV. It did the job.
It's fun. It's fun. Those are fun cars to drive around.
Yeah, Randy is the driver, so
Oh yeah.
all
Do you not
props to
drive?
her for that. I do drive, but
You just don't like to.
not as well.
I
So
see.
so
Well,
she prefers to be the one driving.
it's very important to recognize that. You know, it's one of the things that I struggle with most is when I am at the point where I'm either inebriated or exhausted to the point where or I know I shouldn't be driving, and it's very difficult for me to just say like I'm not really in the place to be driving right now. For some reason, I feel like it's demasculating for me to do that, and
Uh,
there's no rhyme or reason behind it. It doesn't make any sense. but it's just I feel very strongly about it. It's very funny. So this past week we were in Lake George. We went for just a day. We were actually in Binghamton for the weekend last weekend,
Oh,
and then we
really?
went to Lake. Yeah, yeah, we went just went with Zach and Chaim Simon, and and then from there we were debating on whether to go to Watkins Glen, Rochester, or Lake George. We ended up going to Lake George, and I got a stomach bug when we got there, and I was just knocked out. And we started driving back from Lake George the next day, and after like an hour of driving, I'm like, I want to keep on going, even though I feel awful. I was like, but I have a family now, and so it would be much more irresponsible of me to to be prideful about it rather than just say like I don't feel well and when you drive for me. So it's one of the I think the second time in our marriage that I ever pulled over and gave Rachel the wheel. Um, but I'm happy I did
Yeah, I definitely have no problems giving over the wheel
it.
on my end. I mean, especially I'm very like I've read plenty of psychology studies about sleep and driving and things like that. So definitely if I like when I was driving to work, when I had to, I was always like super anxious about not getting enough sleep before driving, which just made it harder to fall asleep, but that's another story.
That's yeah. Well, by the way, I bet that serves as a good tool to, to not pass out, is to know the data and know how dangerous that it is, right?
Yeah, no, it's pretty crazy how yeah, sleep deprivation could be basically the equivalent of driving while drunk, depending on how little sleep you got.
What you want to tell me more about the about these studies that you read? Was it directly correlated to work to studies that you're doing, like in terms of your degree, or is this just like material you had to cover as part of prerequisite classes?
No, honestly, neither. I'm just interested in sleep and specifically more like sleep and its connection to mental illness. But yeah, I guess I should point out since we're on your podcast that I am a research coordinator studying clinical psychology, specifically suicide prevention right now, and hopefully a future PhD candidate in clinical psychology. Um, yeah, but one of my like,
And you already have a master's and a bachelor's degree in psychology, right?
yeah, that
Right.
is correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the tell me some of the correlations or the interesting things that you were reading about in terms of exhaustion and mental health and the correlation between the two.
Yeah. So I mean, first with like the driving, I don't remember too many specifics, but definitely there have been studies that they made people sleep deprived, either no sleep or like 4 hours of sleep, and then put them in a like driving simulation and compared that to people who were drunk and saw some pretty similar poor performance in
Does
that
it have to do with
and
response
difficulty stopping
time?
in time. Yeah, response time, just like delayed
But
responses.
so it wouldn't I would imagine um, that when you're drunk, you probably on top of your response time being impacted, your decision making is probably also a lot more brash and a lot less calculated. Is there any kind of correlations between being exhausted and your ability to make safe decisions or better decisions when it comes to driving, or it's more just about the response time and stuff?
I mean, I think this specifically looked at response time, but there is definitely a lot of different studies looking at different sleep measures and impulsivity. So definitely a lack of sleep can also lead to things like impulsivity. One of the most interesting things that I've personally read while reading about sleep and mental health
Hmm.
um, is that problems with sleep, like getting too little sleep, messing up your sleep schedule, in people who already have bipolar disorder, can trigger manic episodes in people with bipolar disorder. So, manic episodes are periods. Part of it is impulsivity, risk taking, among other things.
But that's
So
if you're already. That's if you're already. That's if you're already suffering from being bipolar.
yeah, so that's specifically for people with bipolar who have had it before. It's not gonna like necessarily give you bipolar. I mean, maybe
No,
scientists
well,
maybe looking into
but
stuff like that, but that's definitely not what this was looking at. But definitely
I'm wondering if it
impulsivity as
manifests
a
in a.
whole
If it,
also.
yeah, because I was gonna say,
Yeah,
because just because someone's not bipolar, I'm sure that it happens on a much less extreme or smaller scale, but I'm sure it still occurs.
yeah, and risk
Exhausted.
taking definitely increases when you are more sleep deprived.
Yeah.
Kind
Why
of
is
the
that?
brakes come off.
Do you know
So
why?
I mean, I don't think anyone necessarily 100% knows why. Like I said, a lot of this I've looked into. Like I read a book by Matthew Walker on sleep, which is where I get a lot of my information, and I've read a few research studies besides that. I think some people believe that it has to do with the reward area of the brain, which I won't get too specifics into sciencey terms, but that potentially like the brakes on that system are kind of loosened, if you will, when you're sleep deprived, so that they're able to kind of go and be activated without any sort of brakes or stop on them.
Right. So it's removing that speed bump between your brain and your decision making
Yeah,
and your actions, I guess.
from what I
Yeah.
understand. Yeah, but I'm far from an expert.
Right. I listened to a couple. Huberman had I think Dr. Walker on for like I
For a
think
while,
it
yeah, I
was
think they're good friends.
yeah they had a six episode series on sleep. I didn't listen to all six, but I listened to the ones that had to do with creativity and learning and like information retention and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
it was all really cool. It was all really cool stuff and dreaming too. Um, it's cool. It's cool because I mean I don't know. I mean, how new it is or how recent how groundbreaking it is. But he seems to be pretty. There seems to be some cool information about like dreams and and understanding almost like where they come from and the way that our brain works to generate them. And correlation to our actual. Like I think like I remember them talking about the fact that when people were sleeping, if someone was sleep talking and then they woke them up while they were sleep talking and then they asked them what they were dreaming about that there was almost no correlation between the quality, like what they were, like the information that was in their dream and what they were saying while they were sleep talking, which I thought was really interesting. I thought was really cool because it shows that our brain is so active on different levels and just like doing different things simultaneously that aren't necessarily in line with one another.
yeah, no, it's definitely a lot of cool stuff. I think with Matthew Walker, definitely even in his book and a lot of his stuff, like he has some things that are like super cool that like are almost definitely like replicated in studies and like definitely true, and then some things that are more like his personal theories that have evidence but like are very avant-garde ideas and studies that haven't had the chance to be replicated that we'll see how accurate they are in like 10, 20 years. And I
Yeah, how
think
they
he would
hold up.
admit that too. So definitely,
Yeah,
like a lot of the stuff about memory and learning, that stuff is pretty conclusive from what I understand.
yeah, 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 definitely. It's also interesting because I know that the other thing that you and I have in common that we both love is creative expression and writing, and I've read many accounts uh, from musicians or poets or any kind of creative sort that sleep deprivation actually like they produce some of the best content and some of their best creative expression when they're sleep deprived and like there's something about like there'll be like if someone's working on a song. There's a famous case with Springsteen where he was recording the Born to Run record, and um, and in that album there's a song called Jungle Land, and there's like I think a 3 or 4 minute saxophone solo by Clarence Clements, and they were working on getting that solo perfect for like 2 or 3 straight days in the studio, and like only after they were like complete like and you hear a lot of stories like this where like they're absolutely exhausted and like they're at the tail end of like whatever their like the consciousness, like they're on the verge of passing out, and all the substances in the world, all the coffee, all the pot, all the alcohol, whatever it is, like you just can't even like take it anymore, and you're about to pass out, and then you just summon up from somewhere, like this absolute beautiful, final like little bit of effort of expression that just and that's always like and then you can replicate it from there after that. But
Yeah.
just to like find that initially to begin with has to do with when you're exhausted and you're trying to write something and you finally get to and you're like in front of the computer and you're writing and all of it's garbage and then the last thing that you get, that last paragraph, that last lyric or that last verse, you're like, wow, where did that even come from? I don't even know what happened, to me there.
Yeah. And I would say I feel like that probably has to do something with like those breaks coming off, like similar to
Yeah, the lack of
impulsivity.
inhibition. Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
right,
and
right, right.
I
Which,
can tell you that personally, I'm not good when I'm sleep deprived creatively, but definitely when I first wake up in the morning, those like first 15 minutes when I'm still like half asleep, probably my brain is still kind of getting out of the stages of sleep and completely waking up. Like when I'm taking a shower in the morning, that's when I get my best ideas because my mind just kind of wanders off without any checks.
do you, when you first wake up, is the first thing you do check your phone and start stimulating yourself or like your brain, or do you kind of like get up, slowly hop in the shower, get into it, and then those ideas come to you while you're doing that?
Um, I definitely try not to go on my phone, but I definitely do a fair amount of the time. I feel
Hmm.
like during the week I'm in more of a rush, so I definitely don't necessarily take it slowly, but I get up, get my clothes, and basically go straight into the shower within the first couple of minutes of being up. Um, and then usually I'm just like thinking of an idea and then it just kind of like spirals. Like it kind of feels like right when you're about to fall asleep at night and your mind is just kind of like going from idea to idea and you don't know how it's even like getting there, if you know what I mean. And that's what
Yeah,
it kind of feels
definitely.
like in the shower. It's just like bouncing around, then you get to something and you're like, oh wow, that's actually a good idea. I should probably write that down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you never do, of course. Because, I mean, I
Oh
don't
no,
know about you, but I don't.
I have a billion notes open in my phone with different
So
ideas.
I
I
used
try
to
to
do
keep all of
that.
them.
I tried to do that. I've done it. I did that for years actually. And then like I would like pop up my notes and like write like this little bit that came out at me, but then I wouldn't really the same spirit or whatever that brought it, the same like nonlinear thought that just like created like, this great or ridiculous association or idea or thought or stream of consciousness. It's it's always very hard for me to build on that, like that source where it came from, like that lightning struck, and then the second that it finished striking, and I walk away with that one line, it gets I almost feel like the rest of what I'm writing after that to like create some kind of body or structure for it, it it becomes forced and mechanical, and then it's just never as good, and like I wish I could just write like a comprehensive poem, even if it's just a half a page long, of just relatively ideas that are relatively correlated to one another, that kind of make enough sense that they could be together. But I have like pages and pages of these one liners that I just thought of, that, or maybe even three or four liners, but that I have no idea how to build on.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's true for like when you think of like a nice metaphor or something to throw in writing, but for like bigger ideas, because like you and I are different. You write a lot of poetry and I do more like novels and longer stories. So I feel like for longer stories, the shower ideas work out better because they're usually more
Right.
usable because it's not like a line that then I'm like, okay, but how do I get to this line and what do I write after this? It's more of like, oh, I've been stuck on this. Like, how does this character like get out of prison? Like, how does he break out? And then I'll get the idea and I'll be like, oh, that kind of works.
Right. So I would love for you to explain to me. because I have no idea how to do this. The way my brain works, I don't know how to exercise this. It's something I actually I've been wanting to work on. Is I get I'm very good at expressing or coming up with immediate or short term, ideas, which is why but I have a very difficult time maintaining a big picture in my head. And so like what you would say is, you're coming up with a story, and you think about how this character got out of jail. I can't really. I mean, when you're writing, especially like let's say that this book that you've been working on for a while now, you have the whole idea in your head, and then you break it down into words and chapters and different parts of the story, right? So you have like a full vision of like where you want your characters kind of to end up, or where you want the story to end up. You have a start point and end point, and then the middle is you articulating it and like working it out, right?
For the most part, I don't know. I mean, I definitely wish that I had my ending a little more solid than it is. I feel like I definitely am willing to change it a bit here or there, depending on
Sure,
what
but you
ideas
could
come
keep
up
that,
for the
but you could
middle.
keep that, you could kind of keep that whole big picture in your head at one time, right? Like you don't when you're writing, you see how what you're coming up with relates to the rest of the story, right?
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah. So I can't do that at all, and that's kind of what restricts me to. It's not even in writing. It's like every capacity of my life. If you told me what like I want to do and where I want to be in 5 years, I couldn't tell you where I want to be in 5 months. Or like if you told me, what's your plan for, what's your plan, what's your dream plan for how you want X, Y, and Z to work out. I can't really think long term. I could only think of like what's happening now, what I want to do, and then I look at things in very small steps, and then I accomplish each little step, and I kind of see along the way what kind of image is forming, or what kind of idea is forming, or what kind of narrative is forming, and then only after working on a lot of small parts, I'm like, oh, now I see what's emerging from here. But I never had an intention,
Yeah.
um, the idea kind of like, almost like if I was like sculpting something or painting something, and this happens all the time. Like I'll start painting. My wife and I would do, we used to do more, but we'll do paint nights where we just, sit down, put on a record, or, a concert in the background, and then we'll just paint. And generally speaking, my wife will go through the computer, just Google like, ideas for painting, and then, replicate it or put her own twist on it. And I'll start just by painting a background color, and then just kind of see as each thing happens, like where it's taking me and what I could add and what I could do. But I can't get that. I can't have that full picture in advance, and then recreate it step by step and replicate it. It has to almost just be like emergent, one step at a time.
Yeah. I mean, the way I do it, I mean, definitely no matter what, you got to break it down into smaller steps. But definitely, like for my book, I can give, without too many spoilers, that the character's motivation in the first book, at least in the fantasy part, which is the part that I'm working on, because there's an outer world and then there's an inner fantasy world. Um, and in the fantasy world, this person is a human who is thrown into this fantasy world and he just wants to get home. So the whole first book is about him trying to get to this portal home, basically. So then,
Within the
like, once I know,
that's in the fantasy part,
that's in the fantasy part.
right?
Yeah. So if he's trying to get home, then I mean that is what I'm building towards is like him trying to get home, and then it's just like breaking it down into all the parts until then. How do you get from him waking up in this fantasy world to him getting to this portal, whether he gets in or not, because that's not a given. Um, but his journey to this portal home, what
And you
is
do
stopping
notes,
him?
right? Like you do notes rather along the way, like a kind of basic structure of like where the ideas are, and then you'll actually convert those notes into chapters, or you'll just have that in mind and start writing, and then just see what comes out of that.
So, I mean, it definitely started like a long time ago with you know that I have done a couple of National November Writing Months, which is where you write 50,000 words in the month of November. So definitely a lot of my original ideas started with that. Um, Honestly, I think I needed a lot more planning before I got into that, just because I feel like fantasy, even more than like realistic fiction, takes more planning. I guess it probably depends for each author, but for me, I'm learning for that it takes a lot more planning. So now I'm kind of going through it with a lot more detail before.
Right, before going ahead. Yeah. And it might just be, by the way, that it might be that I have to. Hello? You here?
My AirPods disconnected again. I
Oh.
may
Well, I got almost everything you said, I think. I got everything you said. Hello, hello? Yeah, I hear you great. It's perfect. Yeah, my AirPods randomly do that too, by the way. I don't know, like they'll without me doing anything, they'll just connect to my computer or connect to the car, or not the car, but a computer or an iPad or my wife's phone, and I have no idea what happened. I'll just end up on a conversation with my sister-in-law because my wife was talking to her and it connected to her AirPods. So
Yeah, it's done
I
that
get
during
that.
work meetings for sure.
Has it? Or someone else
Yes.
has where you've joined someone else's work meeting, or someone else has connected to your headphones
No,
while you were in the meeting?
I was leading, it wasn't exactly that, but I was like leading a meeting and they could hear me, but for some reason the audio just like cut off. And I was like leading the meeting and they were saying something and I just pretended to hear them because I didn't want to let them know that
Yeah.
the headphones stopped working.
So what did you do? You just smile and nodded? I don't really know what to do about situations like that. It happens with work sometimes.
I just disconnected the headphones and then just kept going on once I saw nobody else was
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah. 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 Um, so I guess it's doable for me as well. It's just taking the time, it's just practicing the discipline of sitting and coming up with ideas, and then like I almost imagine it being like, imagine if you had like bullet points on a page, and then you take each bullet point and you you elaborate and stretch it out as much as possible, provide as much detail and in life to each bullet point, and then you have a story come out of that. Like almost like working backwards from what like a what do you call it? Like note, not notes, but a book report would be. For if you were in school, like you have like a general idea of the story you want to tell, and then you take each aspect of that story and you just expand on it until you have like a full story.
Yeah, kind of. And then I mean, I've also since there is a big fantasy component in a fantasy world, I've been kind of breaking it down into like what fantasy creatures do I want, what clothes do they wear, what cities are there, and like what's the history. And I've probably gone a little bit too far down the rabbit hole, to be honest, but doing that also helps generate ideas not only to make the world richer, but also to enhance the plot and gives me plot ideas as well.
And I bet it also helps, by the way, with actual dialogue in the book. Like I know a lot of actors will talk about like when they're acting, they want to know what their character's story is before they step on screen because they're like, I need to know what my motivation is. I need to know my background because a lot of the words that you say can carry a lot of different weight and meaning depending on what the background of the character is, or the context, or how deep your world goes. So I mean, I'm sure I don't think there's such thing as too much, background world. It's just how much you're going to get into the story, and and how dense you're going to make your actual book. But I don't think in terms of I think in terms of the actual, for the sake of the story, I don't think there's too much that you can do that that in brainstorming, a history of this fantasy world that you're coming up with.
Yeah, I think it's mainly just like at some point you got to just start writing, and that's the thing that I think I'm finally nearing that stage. I think I have a few more things to shore up, but I think I'm almost up to that. I definitely I haven't followed this advice recently, but I'm hoping to now that I'm hoping to kind of strap myself down and start writing, definitely I think one thing that helps is just like telling yourself you're gonna sit down in this chair without distractions for 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour, whatever it is. And even if you're bored, like, and if you can't think of anything to write, then you're just gonna sit at the desk. I think Neil Gaiman talked about that in an interview once. I know Brandon Sanderson has talked about just like the first 45 minutes are gonna be kind of the less useful time because you gotta get into the zone and into the flow, but it's that pushing past that initial part and giving yourself that extra time to really get into a flow state where the good stuff happens. So you may be stuck for the first 40 minutes until you really like get going. So if you only give yourself 40 minutes every day, you're not going to be as productive as if you give yourself 5 hour block or something like that, or 2 3 hour blocks or something.
Right, right, right. I want, I wonder how much of an impact actually just, and I know it's hard to do, but every time that I've done this, I don't do this as often as I think would actually be healthy for me. But there'll be times, for example, if I'm jogging or if I'm on a walk or if I have a lot on my mind and I'm driving, and I feel like everything is kind of like bubbling up in my head. I will, if I say it out loud to myself, if I just like say, if I just talk, I just say words out loud to myself, then my brain will process that. I think ideas in your head are a very difficult thing to capture and get in and to put into any kind of linear or cohesive fashion because they're so undeveloped in your brain and it's a combination of like feelings and thoughts and emotions and whatever's on your mind that it kind of gets all bumbled up together. And so by actually talking out loud, it kind of provides some kind of direction for me that it kind of sifts out all the it sorts out through the static and whatever else is going on in my head. And so if I'm jogging and I have a million things in my head and I'm thinking I'm tired, I'm thinking whatever, and I just say out loud, like, I got this. Or there have been times where actually I've been jogging and I've had a lot on my mind in general. Like, this past year, when I turned 28 on my birthday, I was going for a jog and in the middle of the run, there was so many thoughts in my head and so many different emotions about turning 28 that I physically stopped. I literally could not keep on, like, my brain had just rendered my body completely incapable of just moving itself forward like that. And I just started talking out, just saying out loud while I was on the street, with my headphones in the middle, sweating in my jogging clothes. I was like, just saying like 28, like, what have I been up to? What am I doing? What am I going to be next year? What have I done until now? Could I do, what could I do differently? And I suppose I could do this. And I suppose that it's a good thing that I'm, a dad. And I'm suppose it's a good thing that I'm doing, I'm teaching. And I suppose it's a good thing that I'm doing X, Y, and Z sales. But, something, I wish I was being more creative, and as I say these things, all those thoughts in my head started to kind of get in line, in
Yeah.
their own separate containers or cubbies, for lack of better words, and everything kind of sorted itself out. I'm sure that doing that, I'm sure that the thinking process would be sped up if you're sitting at your desk and instead of just having you sitting in your thoughts silently for 40 minutes saying out loud, Kyle went to the supermarket. Kyle's supermarket is part of, his family history, and he grew up going here, and he recognizes, that the same thing on the wall was there like 10 years ago, and what's that have to do with anything? And then all of a sudden and then all the and then your brain starts moving, because you've been saying this out loud and you kind of giving yourself a little bit of direction. Have you ever tried something like that?
That's interesting. I mean, I can tell you that when first of all, that's very impressive that you can hold all those thoughts in your head when you're running, because when I'm swimming, because I don't run too often, but when I'm swimming, I literally like just usually get like the first line of a song stuck in my head and that just replays in my head the whole time. And I keep thinking that I'm gonna have these like amazing book ideas while I'm swimming. Like I don't know if you saw Tick Tick Boom, the movie.
No, I haven't. I've
Oh,
heard of it, but I haven't. What's
you
this?
would
What
love
what
it.
could I watch it on?
it's on Netflix, which makes it hard because I know everyone's getting booted off Netflix. But if
Nah,
you
I've been the source. Everyone else has been mooching on my Netflix, so I'm safe for now.
okay, well, it's on Netflix. You would love it. But there's a scene where he's in the pool. That's not a spoiler, and he like has his eureka moment in the pool, and I'm just thinking like I just can't think while I'm doing rigorous exercise. Um, but for me, I feel like it's more. Definitely like walking, I've been trying to be more intentional with. Normally I listen to like a podcast or music. And music is fine, honestly, but just like I'm trying to move away from listening to podcasts to give myself like the space to kind of like think out more creative ideas.
And
Um,
have your own thoughts rather than
yeah, and have my own
processing someone
thoughts while I'm
else's.
walking. Yeah. And definitely, like, honestly, I feel like I work kind of the opposite from you in that the more like letting my ideas flow without thinking about them too much, the more that I get the good ideas. Like, the more I'm trying to think of like what's the solution to this problem while I'm walking, I'll just be walking for 20 minutes thinking what's the solution to this problem over and over again. Versus just
Yeah, I
letting my
can't do that.
thoughts kind
I'll
of
kill
flow a
myself.
bit.
I can't do that, dude. I don't know how you do that. And it works for you? Like you come up with a solution, or what do? Do you think to yourself, you come up with a variety of different solutions and you just discard them or keep them as it goes? You're like, how does he deal with this challenge, right? Oh, he deals with it like that? Nah, I don't like that. He deals with it like that. Is that how you work,
I
or
mean,
you
definitely
don't even?
when I'm walking and thinking like, what's the solution? Then I will 100% of the time come up with zero solutions. But when I'm walking and just like letting my mind roam and like take one idea, one possible solution, and just like let it roll in my mind, like, and then this would lead to this, and it would lead to this, and it would lead to this, and then eventually I come across an idea where I'm like, oh, that's actually good. So the more I can like let my mind kind of waver and not steer it too much, um, is when I get my best ideas when I'm walking, which I guess is kind of similar to taking a shower, just like not being too forceful with it, letting it go wherever it goes.
Yeah. How's your attention span with your ability when it comes to your ability to stick with an idea while you're walking?
That's a good question. I mean, my attention span in general has gone down the tubes, like I feel like most people um, in our current modern world.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm generally pretty good for at least like 20 minutes or so. That's my walk to synagogue. So especially on Shabbat, since you can't really be listening to podcasts or carrying around a phone or anything like that. So that's really one of the best times for me. Each time I'm walking there and back, I'm thinking about my book,
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
each and every time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. 20 minutes is a really good amount of time to be able to sit on anything. I don't, I usually will, I don't know. I've never been formally diagnosed with ADD, and I don't even know if I necessarily have it because I have an ability to do things, to do a set task for an extended period of time, but my brain will be all over the place while I'm doing that task, you know,
Yeah,
and I think I don't have that. I don't have that inability to, like, for example, if I'm practicing guitar, I could sit and I could jam and just like play along the scales for 30, 40 minutes, even an hour or more straight, and I could be in one spot and do that, and it feels amazing, and I don't mind doing that, and that's fine. But I won't be able to replicate the same thing or stick on to one idea for an extended period of time, and so I end up coming up with a lot of short quality stuff. This actually also applies to writing, I guess, and ideas in general. That I'll come up with a lot of good quality stuff in short bursts that are great, and then I'll just never get back to them, and I'll just keep on. I'll move on to the next thing and next thing. And I mean, and this actually goes back to the thing that you and I have always talked about since our first writing class together. which was the process of editing and how you love editing and I can't stand it. And and for probably 3 or 4 years, I had a reminder on my phone every day, which was never useful more than like the first week that I had it. But a reminder on my phone to edit for 10 minutes a day, and I could count on one hand the amount of times that I've actually done that. In the last
Yeah.
4 or 5 years, I just can't. Because I feel like when I'm coming up with something creative, it's in its most raw and best form, most sincere, authentic form when it just comes out of me. And then when I sit there and I haggle on which word to use and what metaphor to use, it almost feels too manufactured for me, even though it might be better at the end and I might come up with better quality, I might come up with a better phrase or I might find a better word down the line. It feels more manufactured to me and it just, I don't know. It really it's so hard for me to do. But that's probably also linked with my inability to kind of stick on one idea for too long.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, you almost definitely don't have ADHD. I think that's, like I said, I think it's more of a modern thing because of cell phones and social media and stuff like that that's rotting our attention spans. Um, but definitely, I definitely feel that at points also that I'm having trouble sticking on a point. But I think like editing, I love more than you is just because I love to critique anything that I'm reading or watching. Like anytime I'm watching a movie or reading a book, I'm always thinking, how can this be better than it is right now? So I'm a very annoying person to watch movies with sometimes because we'll come out of a movie, even one that I like a lot of it, and I'll be like, oh, it would have been better if they did this, and like this wasn't as good as it could have been, and the character development, like I didn't really see it here, and it'll just be
Give
like,
me an
can you say
example.
anything positive about this? And I'm like,
Give
I
me an
liked
example.
it.
Give
I
me an
just
example of that. Give me an example of a movie that you did that pissed off your wife or friends or that will piss me off. Because I'm very curious to hear like what your what that is in application.
um, it's a good question. Let me try to think of one. I mean, you can take your pick of any modern Marvel movie, and I can tell you why it's been trash. But
what about the first Iron Man movie?
no, the first
Because I
Iron
think
Man
that
movie was very, the early Marvel movies were very good.
right. Okay. How about this? Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I love that. I really, really enjoyed that movie. I don't. I know that it obviously could have been better. The way I kind of gauge movies is how good is it at being what it's trying to be. Not what would make it like a masterpiece necessarily. So like the movie Anybody But You. Did you watch that with Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney?
No, I didn't see that one.
So it's this romantic comedy. It's a classic, goofy, borderline, definitely absurd, not borderline, absolutely absurd romantic comedy. But that's what it was trying to be. Like it wasn't trying to be sophisticated. It wasn't trying to. It was a lot of physical comedy, a lot of body comedy, a lot of goofiness. And so I watched it with my wife and my sister-in-laws, and I watched the first hour of it, and and I came to them. I'm like, guys, you have to watch this movie. I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited. It's such a great movie. You guys are gonna love it. It's so funny. It's so good. And then you watch it, and they're like, that movie was terrible. And I'm like, yeah, but it was exactly what it was supposed to be. Like it was supposed to be like a feel good, stupid, cheesy comedy. That's romantic comedy, and they didn't like it. I felt like more like Multiverse of Madness was pretty good at what it was trying to be.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had a couple problems with that one. I'd say first, and I don't know how much this was because of COVID and they weren't able to do what they originally planned, but like Wanda's character, she like learned a lesson in WandaVision and then she just like completely went to stage one again and all the character development went away and she was learning the same lesson over again of how to deal with her grief. That was one of my main problems was that I did not understand how at the end of WandaVision she still ended up where she was at the beginning of that movie.
Right. Okay, so from a character perspective, you feel like either regressed or just kind of repeated exactly what you close the door on a character, and then you just open it again for the sake of this movie.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, what
And
else?
then so, I mean, some other things, and honestly, I haven't seen it in a while, so I feel like I'd have to rewatch to give it my full
Yeah,
critique. But I thought the beginning of the movie was pretty good. I thought it lasted maybe a little longer than it needed to be, and I feel like they were trying to do a lot of fan service with specific things, which at the expense of like the actual plot.
yeah.
Um, I thought
It
that like America, who was it? Who's the young
America
girl?
Chavez. Yeah, America
America
Chavez.
Chavez. Yeah, her like powers were like a little like not very
Undefined.
well defined
Yeah.
in terms of how
So
they
was
could like
Wanda's.
beat
It took
Wanda.
Wanda's probably it took Wanda like three movies to have her character like her have her powers like really elaborated on. I mean, it really changes, from the first couple of movies. But I guess they kind of just expect the audience to either have a short memory, which they usually do, or just kind of check. I mean, at a certain point, you're checking reality at the door anyway, and you're just kind of saying, "Listen, are you all in on this with us or not?" And try to make it as believable in the moment as it could be.
Yeah. I mean I definitely think that did you watch the like animated I forgot what it's called
What if?
now. Yeah, What If?
I watched the first season. I watched it more passively, so I was kind of just, I wasn't paying too close attention, but I thought it was cute. I thought the ideas were cool, and actually, as the show advanced, because I think it was like eight episodes or something. Towards the last like two or three episodes, it had done a good enough job building on itself that it actually, even though I was passively watching for the first five episodes, it actually drew me in for the last three, where I actually had to say like, oh wait, what they say, and stop and put down what I was doing and actually pay attention to the last three episodes.
Yeah, so I was hoping that the Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness was going to be similar to the Doctor Strange that you
Yes,
saw
I thought
in
they were
What
going to be
If, because
linked.
I thought What
Yes,
If Doctor Strange is so much more interesting.
yeah, yeah. Which actually gives you a really interesting, a cool, like the boundaries in or what the creative expression you can do in an animated series or show or movie um, is is a lot more flexible. You could do a lot more when you're not necessarily linked to live action. And even with all the CGI in the world, there are certain things that I think you could sell more as an animated story than as a real life one.
Yeah. So there were definitely things to change there, but I'll probably text you later thinking of another example of just a movie that I just destroyed all the pleasure from. But definitely after every Marvel movie, like
Yeah, you'd
me and
watch
my
it, you walk
brother
away.
love to talk about everything that they're doing wrong.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's in that phase. I'm recently in the camp of sticking up for them and just being like, listen, like I mean, it's not as good as it was, but it's fine. And I think that if you look at the problem is that they had an enormous reputation to maintain, and it's almost impossible to exceed expectations with every movie. I watched Thor: Love and Thunder, which I could not stand actually. I thought it was awful. But I remember in the movie in the we watched it. My wife and I watched it in theaters. We were actually in Disney Springs, downtown Disney in Orlando, in the AMC theater there, and they have this really cool theater. I think it's three stories. It's this enormous screen, and there's three different levels, and it was sold out. I mean, it was an absolutely sold out show, and it must have been the first week or two that it was out. And they kept on having these moments that were meant to be, uh, you know, fan service, or I guess appealing to the audience, a sense of enthusiasm for the characters, and every single one of them fell so short of exceeding of getting any kind of reaction from the audience. The audience was dead silent the entire movie, and I could not help to think because I was comparing it to the scene in Endgame where Captain America picks up Thor's hammer, and there was nothing. There's such a crazy, exhilarating feeling of having the whole audience just flip out with you, and it doesn't
Yeah.
even make a difference how invested you are in the movie. Just being in a room with, 200, 300, 500 people that are reacting, and excited, and the energy is so palpable. And then he pick, and the hammer picks up and flies towards him, and Captain America catches it, and the whole place goes nuts. And whether you're invested or not, my wife wasn't invested at all when we were watching it, and it was like, oh, sorry, I wasn't with my wife. It was with my brother. My brother was a lot less invested. He hadn't really watched many of the movies until then, and you just walk out and you're like on top of the world. Like you had this incredible shared experience where everyone just feels great. And then we walked out of Thor and we just all felt like that was kind of disappointing, like everyone was really you could feel the moments, and it's also funny because these are so manufactured, and it's part of the beauty, the brilliance of having to write a script or directing or whatever it is, where you could actually feel the tension and the build up to these moments that are about to be these fan service moments, and you could actually feel the tension in the room going up, and the excitement in the room rising as yes, something is about to happen, and then the culminating scene, instead of that explosion, it's kind of just a little dud, and it took away from the movie. I bet my perception of the movie is that it's a lot worse than it actually was because of how let down that shared experience was.
Yeah, no. And especially like the when he's like with Zeus or something like that at one point in the movie, that was
Yeah,
like one of the worst scenes I think in all of
and that
Marvel.
was that Russell Crowe? Was Zeus Russell Crowe?
Maybe.
I
I
think it
can tell you
was.
I'm not rewatching that movie, so I
Yeah,
don't.
I know, I know, I know, I know. It's funny because I love to rewatch movies, and recently I haven't had the ability to stomach rewatch. I think the last Marvel movies I was able to rewatch was Doctor Strange, that Spider-Man, the third Spider-Man, No Way Home, and I've tried rewatching Guardians 3 and Black Panther 2, and I didn't find myself invested enough in anything really. But I think they could turn around because at the end of the day, I mean, I think people forget Phase One and Two, even three had a bunch of duds too that they kind of just wrote off. The first Hulk movie they kind of just wrote off. Iron Man 2 and 3, I love the first one and I love the Iron Man character, but those were nothing compared to I mean, like they were kind of just like forgotten, movies. And even the original first two Thor movies were just, or sorry, the second Thor movie was really terrible, And
Yeah.
so like they always had a bunch of misses, and they always would take, these big swings, and sometimes it'd work and sometimes it wouldn't. But I think that the level of scrutiny that they're facing now, deserved or undeserved, is it prohibits them from really getting a fair chance with the audience. If a new studio was just coming, if the name Marvel wasn't attached to any of these movies, and you started a new cinematic universe with starting with the Doctor Strange character and moving on, or even with the Eternals, which I didn't really love, yeah, which was awful, and
The Eternals
Shing,
was my least favorite Marvel movie, I think.
yeah,
I
yeah,
wouldn't have watched the ending if I didn't think that it was potentially important for the future movies.
right. But my point is that, so now you have, let's say you have these 5 or 6 movies that they made since Endgame, and they probably shot around 45-50%, right, from the field, right? You probably say about half the movie, because without the Marvel name and branding and expectations, they were entertaining enough, and they were cool, and they were fun, and they were good stories, and but they don't get that, but we don't give them that same kind of fair chance as what we would have, because we just our expectations are so unfairly high. Like they told the whole story, they finished the story, they did a great job wrapping it up, and now they're trying to tell another story, and we're supposed to, and we're supposed to disassociate that first chapter and that first narrative with this new one, and I think it's too hard for people to do that.
I definitely agree that expectations are higher, but I also think that the quality of movies are just not as good. I feel like they open themselves up too much and like they added too many new characters and it's just turned into a bit of a mess. Like now
Yeah,
everyone's excited again because they're going back to like X-Men and they pulled in like the old Spider-Man characters and stuff like that. Like that's what excited people. These new
and
characters
they're
are
slowing
not
down, and
as
they're not
exciting.
pumping out 5 movies a year, and that's a big deal because I think people are getting fatigued. But it's good. I mean, I'm happy that they learn it and that they learned this. And actually, so there's this great book. It's one of my favorite books ever. It's called Disney War, written by James Stewart, and I've read the book probably 5 times. I love that book, and it's all about the everything that has to do with the Walt Disney Company from the 1980s until 2007 or so when Bob Iger took over, because Michael Eisner was at the helm, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who started DreamWorks later, was they're going through the golden age of the 90s with Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid,
Yes.
after that, like 6 or 7 golden years, they had 10 years of just absolute flops, and just they couldn't do anything right for those 10 years. And I think a lot of this is cyclical. I think a lot of this it's a very typical Hollywood formula, which is that you try, like, some studio will take a chance on a story, on a narrative, on a director, on whatever, and then but they're a little hesitant to do it, and they don't want to give the guy as much money, or they don't want to give him as much creative freedom, and they want to be as least risky as possible. And then they do well, and then they just tell the person to go ahead and run with it, and that person will run, and then they insist on building it up and more and more and more, and they just, I think everyone just only has so much they can actually provide at scale, within a certain period of time. And and then when you break that, then you get the direct to DVD movies like Mulan 3 or The Lion King 1.5 or whatever it was, and then someone has to be replaced, or someone has to go somewhere else, or you have to bring someone else in, and then you start something new. So I think that this is almost like, I mean, if you look at the history of almost any successful franchise or any successful movie studio, they go through this every 10, 15 years or so. I don't think it's anything new. And you got to just give them a chance to kind of find their footing again.
Yeah,
But
no, I don't think like I'm still watching Marvel movies. I don't think they're out for the count. I just think that they have some recovery work to do. Did you see the biggest news within the past couple of days for Marvel?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That Robert Downey Jr. is coming back, right?
As Doctor Doom.
Right, but I
That
think they're going to tie him in with. I think they're going to make him like an Iron Man variation, because I think that it's supposed to be a multiverse link, isn't it?
yeah, but he's still I think he's gonna be like the main villain.
The
Maybe
villain.
taking over for like Jonathan Majors because
Yeah.
that's not quite gonna work out. Um
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
Poor girlfriend.
that's exciting. I've heard mixed things from different people of their reaction to it, but I think that sounds like an awesome path to go.
I think it's gonna be great. I think it's gonna be great. I think that, yeah, they're gonna do great things. Do you hear the story on a not Marvel note, just in terms of like this example of this idea of Hollywood being a little risky and then giving people space? What's his name? I think it's Damien Chazelle, the guy that did Whiplash and La La Land. You know the story?
I do not. I remember watching Whiplash vaguely. Haven't seen La
Yeah, that
La
was
Land.
Miles Teller. I love him. And J.K. Simmons. So basically, what happened was Damien Chazelle is brilliant. And he was very young at the time. I think he was 23 or 24, and he came to the studios with the script for La La Land, which was with Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling. About this struggling actress and a struggling musician coming together, and how California could potentially suck the life or dreams out of someone, or what the cost of being successful and making it in Hollywood is. Um, and and it's a musical, and it had all these great, these grandiose ideas, and and it was really cool. But none of the studios were willing to take a chance on a 24-year-old, a 23-year-old that wanted to just, hey, this is my first movie, I'm coming in, and I'm doing this. So they said no thanks. Everyone passed, and then he wrote the script for Whiplash, which was a small independent film, got like a tiny little budget, and released it to a film festival. It became a huge success. Opened on a bunch of, instead of opening on a couple of dozen screens, it opened on hundreds of thousands of screens. And then once they saw that, they're like, "Oh, dude, yeah, here's a,
Yeah. Here's
here's
the
our credit
money.
card.
Yeah.
Here's a credit card. Have a good time." And so he made La La Land, and La La Land was incredible, and it was a huge explosion. They're like, wow, like this guy, like he's brilliant, he's incredible, he's got everything going for him. And then they gave him $200 million or so to make a movie called Babylon, which if you watch first of all, the cast itself was crazy. It was Tobey Maguire was in it, Margaret Robbie was in it, Brad Pitt was in it. Trying to remember who else was in it, but it was just this incredible cast, and you watch the movie and you could see where all the money went. Like everything was just so incredible and grandiose, and the movie was awful. Like you could tell, like he was going for a grand slam, and it flopped so hard, And it's just, and
Yeah.
that's a microcosm of what happens to everyone. Like, like there's so many things you can't control, and there's so many things that you have no idea happen. So it starts off, no one will give you a shot, and then you make a little shot for yourself, and then they give you a shot, and then you succeed, and then they give you another shot, and then you don't, and you just have no idea like what to do. And I don't know what his plans are from now, because he came out with he made Babylon. It came out, I think, in 2022. It was over COVID. It was towards the tail end of it, but
I'm
yeah,
sure he'll get
it was.
another shot.
Yeah, I'm sure he
Yeah.
will too. It's just funny. It's just funny to just observe it, to just see this wave of like how that industry
Yeah.
works.
I mean, honestly, it's
Um,
happened to me even like in high school. I have very vivid memory in like every year for high school we had color war, and the only thing that I was ever interested in when we did color war was doing the video for color war.
mhm.
And I remember sophomore year, I was sick freshman year when they were doing Color War, so I was out. Sophomore year, nobody else wants to work on the video, so me and one of my friends, Ben Stern, Claire Davis, we did the video. It was terrible in sophomore year. We did it again in junior year because nobody else wanted to do it anyway, and it was like known as like, not to prop myself up, one of the best Color War videos. Um, in at least our school's history. And everybody was like so excited about it. And then we made another video the following year. So this was like the fall of our senior year. That was, I think, the best video that I've made. That was just like a video trying to get people to come on a certain school trip. Um, and we had this high trajectory, and then we had two other videos. One of them was our senior year color war video, which we won, even though our video was terrible because nobody else stayed on task for their videos, even though their videos were better. It was like probably one of the worst videos I made. And then we made a Purim spiel because we were in charge of that because the junior year video was good. So they trusted me and him with that. Definitely nothing on him. It was all on me because I wrote a terrible script because I was like, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to do this and this and this. And it was like awful. And it was like 30 minutes long.
Yeah, it's 30 minutes long.
It was,
That's a lot of. How
yeah.
long was the script if the movie went 30 pages? Because I know that generally speaking, I think the way it works is that with a script, it's a page, a minute of dialogue, or a minute per page,
Yeah. So
right?
I think it was probably about 25 to 30 pages. And like, it was just
Wow.
not what anybody wanted to see in that sort of video. Like, they just want to see people making fun of teachers. And I was trying to inject the plot and all these other things.
Yeah,
And I was
well,
like, I'm going to
you were
make
too
it funny
sophisticated at the
and the
time.
plot. Yeah, it was exactly what you were saying. Like, you,
Yeah, you're swinging for the
you
fences.
take your shots and you hit about 50% of them, and that's all you can hope for. Hi.
Yeah, yeah. 50, listen, 50%. If you know, 50% in almost any sport is incredible. You know, so or anything that you do. So I definitely hear that. I had my what do you call? It? I had my so for one of my favorite assignments for the last 2 years of teaching was I'd give my students a general idea. So, for example, this past year we were reading the lyrics of the Ballad of Billy the Kid, and kind of just going into a little bit of that folklore of who Billy the Kid was and what people found so interesting about him, and um, we played the Billy Joel song, which was the first time I listened to a Billy Joel song in many years. But I found the best version. I played it for class, and then I said, okay, write a 5-page script on the life on any point in the life of Billy the Kid. Right? It could be his first hold up. It could be when he gets caught. It could be, what his funeral procession is like. Anything you want. Write a 5-page script, so it's 5 minutes. I break them up into groups of 4 or 5, and then we're going to spend a couple of days in film, and then I bought everyone pizza, and we had a watch party for
That's
for their
very
final
cute.
videos.
I would have loved that
Yeah,
as a kid. Yeah.
and it was so great to see what these kids came up with, and to see, and you could tell and you could also see it was also really cool and fun was you could see different kids' strength come out in different ways, so like the editing in one video may not have been very good, but kids are doing backflips all over the screen, or all these
Yeah.
crazy, parkour moves. But and then on the other hand, one script might not have been, as strong, or the acting may not have been as strong, but they did really, really cool editing, and you could see that they were technically, interested in the aspects of editing, and adding background music and noise, and what they could do. And I mean, what I really wanted to do was be able to kind of, based on that, break kids up into their own groups of who would make the best teams together to make the best movie. So, I mean, naturally, because kids tend to, people tend to kind of stick to, especially when you're being broken up into groups, they stick to people that they feel are similar to themselves. But then you're getting, a group of 4 strong writers, and no one could act and no one could edit, and a group of kids that are more athletically inclined. So they're doing, backflips and skateboarding tricks and everything like that. But, there's no substance to it, and so what I should have done, and what I would like to do is, after doing that, maybe do it again, but break down, what the group, instead of giving them the freedom to choose their own groups, to kind of stick a bunch of kids with different skills together and see what they could come up with. I think that'd be the best thing. That'd be so cool, just to see. It would create such a high quality level film that, I'm sure it'd be very impressive for. It's something that they'll look back on, like what you like. I mean, how many years out of high school are we? Or 10, 12 years out of high school?
Yeah.
I'm sure, and we're still proud of the things that we did. It's still relevant.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's something that I was thinking a lot about actually recently. So tell me what are you studying or doing now? Tell me what you're finding interesting or learning about in terms of the correlation between sleep and mental health, or suicide prevention, or in general. Because I think you told me that you were studying. It was mental health among a younger demographic, right? Among kids.
So I mean that's not specifically what I'm doing now. That's what I want to eventually get to is
Okay.
studying parent interventions for kids who were maltreated or went through trauma, and parent interventions to help the children avoid future mental illness when they grow up. That's what I'm
Quick.
interested in
So,
the future.
so quick question. In terms of that, is there a yardstick that anyone uses to define trauma, or is it just because I feel like, is trauma based on a set of, like, okay, you have a category of like 50 things that could happen to you that's considered trauma, or is it just the way that the child feels is abused or mistreated?
So there are definitions of trauma. I'm more interested, honestly, in childhood maltreatment because trauma is kind of a little more specific than what I'm interested in. But there is a diagnostic manual that very clearly lays out like a lot of the things that are considered trauma. One of the interesting and difficult parts of the field is that they've found that people reporting past trauma versus like current trauma, it doesn't always like match up. Like if you take a child and ask them and get like the current like trauma profile and then ask again in like 20 years or something like that about like maltreatment, it doesn't always match up and they lead to different results for your mental health, as you can imagine. Um,
Well, I'm
that's
sure,
one
but
of the that's one of the
time
stickier
has given
parts.
you, because time gives you the opportunity to allow it to creep into other aspects of your life or deal with it or not deal with it or manifest itself in different ways, right? Like the passing of time as opposed to treating it immediately allows it to kind of spread out into different aspects of your life.
Yeah, and I mean memory is a funky thing, and not that things, not like people are lying or definitely not intentionally lying, but definitely people can like notice where they are now and then pinpoint it to a specific to like a specific point in their childhood and things like that. Which I feel like a lot of TV has trained us to do is like, oh, I'm this way because of this specific thing that happened to me when I was a kid or something like that. And then you kind of like inflate that and say like, oh, I had childhood maltreatment or trauma when I was younger. Um,
Hmm.
versus when you were younger, you didn't really like pay as much attention to it, either for good
Right.
reasons or bad reasons.
Sure.
Um, yeah, so it could go either way. Um, now I don't even know where we started with this topic.
That's okay. It's just what you're, what do you call it? What you're what you're learning about and what you've been studying or finding or realizing recently.
Yeah, so I mean that's the thing that I'm interested in studying, but right now I am studying also something very important. I'm doing work with suicide prevention. I am working at the University of Pennsylvania, and they're doing research, creating a clinical service that's specialized in suicide care is available to emergency departments in the local Philadelphia area. It's open to emergency departments that are under the Penn umbrella.
Hmm.
And the emergency department clinicians can refer their patients while they're in the emergency department to be seen by these clinicians who are specialized in suicide care. So, because emergency clinicians often don't have the time to get the training and the time to actually do the best gold standard treatment for suicide care for patients who are suicidal in the emergency department. Um,
Hmm.
so those patients are either sent to an inpatient unit when sometimes they don't have to be, or they're discharged without really getting any guidance on like how to avoid ending up back in the ED or worse, actually
Yeah. God
committing
forbid.
suicide and killing
Yeah.
themselves. Yeah, so they're able to refer so that we can do the gold standard treatment that they would do if they had the time and the
So
capabilities.
most of the people that you're dealing with are being referred to you. They're not calling you and saying, "Hey, I'm feeling, I'm having these thoughts or I'm having these feelings or I tried to do X, Y, and Z." It's more they're getting filtered into you from other locations.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
from
Yeah.
specifically emergency departments for right now.
So I'm sure you've already heard of, if not already started reading The Anxious Generation with Jonathan Haidt.
So
You ever hear of that?
you told me about him when we were texting a couple of weeks back. So I actually have been listening to the Uberman podcast very
With him?
slowly with him.
Yeah. So this book is incredible. But one of the things that he pointed out, which just has to do with this, I think, and I happen to have it in front of me because I was reading it before you and I started recording, was that the emergency room visits for self harm for within the rate is per 100,000 in the U.S. population, in which adolescents ages 10 to 14 are treated in hospital emergency rooms for non-fatal self-injury, right?
Yeah.
So people that have non-fatally hurt themselves, between the age of 10 and 14, since 2010, there's been an 188% increase for girls between the age of 10 and 14 in self-harm. Um, is the place that you're working at or studying, is it flooded with people that demographic, or is it everyone? Is it people older, younger, guys, girls? What have you been? Is there any kind of trend that you've been noticing, or does that sound like it rings true to you?
So we're in the pretty early stages. We haven't really done data analysis yet, but we are only looking at people who are 18 or over. So
Oh,
we're only
okay,
looking at
gotcha.
adult populations. Yeah. But I mean, in general,
Interesting.
honestly, it's the older adult populations, from what I understand from the research, that
Really?
have the highest, because I mean, their functioning is less, like they're not able to do all the things they were able to. They have to account on other people for their
Yeah,
care.
yeah,
Like
of
if you
course.
can't go to the bathroom normally, like all these different things, you can't
Yeah.
walk around. So
Wow. Right,
I
right.
understandably, like people are living older than they ever have before,
You don't
and
necessarily
as
want to
my
do it
family
anymore.
likes to say, it sucks to get old. Um,
Right. My
so
grandfather says if these are the golden years, you can have them. He goes,
yeah,
"Have them." Yeah, yeah. That's right. That that makes sense. And then there's been the study, but just with that, I think there's been more research now with that age demographic. I think that with psychedelics, and that psychedelics seem to help people or it helps them ease into the notion that this is the point in their lives that they're in, and rather than fight or to be depressed about it, to come to a little bit more of a wholesome or grounded perspective, or even more spiritual, a spiritually comforted perspective about it. Although I know firsthand, again, I can't imagine. I'm not saying, I can't, my grandfather who passed away last year was 94, and he was extremely independent his entire life. He's a
yeah,
Holocaust survivor, and the year before, so he died a year ago, and a year before that, he had a stroke, and for the first time in his entire life, he could not take care of himself. And you just saw how quickly he deteriorated, and he kept on saying, like it's just not like what like what's the like what I'm happy to spend my time with my family. I'm happy to be with my family that I've lived my entire life for. He goes, but I'm just a burden. He just felt like his entire existence was just difficult, was making everyone else's life difficult around him, and he really, towards the end, he really did. He didn't want to keep on living. He was like, it's just not. It's for what already. I hear it. It's really crazy.
yeah.
It's
It's definitely a difficult point. Like I can empathize, like
definitely,
that.
definitely,
Once you get
definitely.
to a certain age, it definitely gets difficult. But I
Yeah.
haven't heard that research with psychedelics. That'd be interesting. I haven't heard anything like specifically for older adults or anything like that.
Well, I think there's something else there is something else that our brain has a certain amount of DMT in it, which is a psychedelic compound, and apparently when you die, it floods your brain, and so that's why. And apparently apparently that has something to do with the fact that when people are about to die, they see old family members in the room with them, or they see no problem, dude. They see old family members in the room or anything like that, and they kind of feel more at peace, and they feel like they're like, and that's something that's actually naturally occurring in our own brain. So it's not like anyone's getting a dose of mushrooms or LSD or anything like that. Like before we die, apparently the DMT is released. Now I haven't done a ton.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, definitely like the brain is deteriorating, and I'm sure I have not looked into this at all, but I would not be shocked to see that like levels of hallucinations and things like that increase in older adults. I would not be shocked. I mean, dementia is obviously one
Yeah, of
thing. I
course.
would not be shocked if psychosis was much higher, um, the higher you get in age.
And I was talking to another friend about this just the other day, my friend Yosef, who before we started recording, we were talking about this, and he was wondering, and I don't know if there's any research. I would actually love to look into it, but he's wondering on an evolutionary level how that would happen. And because it's not necessarily something that, like, how would anyone know to, how would any body know or any brain know to quote unquote pass that on to the next generation, because it only occurs moments before you die. So the way that we would have evolved to get that to for our brain to create that compound, just from an evolutionary level, I think would be really interesting to study also. I don't know if anything's being done about that or not, but it's really cool ideas.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know too much about evolutionary psychology, although I'm pretty sure that is a field that some people go
Yeah,
into.
I
I've
would.
never been
Yeah,
as
it's
much
really cool.
interested in those types of questions.
Really? So, yeah, yeah. I love that kind of stuff too. I mean, I like all this kind of stuff, although I'm not. I'm more conversational than anything about any of it, and I don't. I'm not doing any of this in any kind of professional way. Um,
I'm doing it in a
but
professional way, and I feel like I always need a disclaimer, like, don't take
yeah,
my word for it. Look it up yourself to confirm or deny, because I don't know.
yeah. Well, it's very smart of you, dude.
I'm
It's really
waiting to get
smart.
up to I'm waiting to get up to the point of like all the PhDs in my lab and that I've worked with of just being like, oh yeah, and you could look at this paper and this paper and this paper and like rattle off articles and feel super duper confident in what I'm citing, but not at this moment in
Not
my
yet.
life.
Well, we'll get there soon, dude. I'm
Yes.
sure. I'm sure. Okay, I'm gonna let you go, even though I want to keep on going, but we'll have to have you back. I'll have to have you back. Um, thanks for the time, dude. And I'm sorry to cut it. I'm sorry to cut it short, but I feel like we keep on talking for like another hour about this. So next time,
At least.
we'll have more. Yeah, we'll have put more time put aside. I want to. These episodes have been around anywhere between an hour and 15 minutes apiece, and I would like to get up to the 2.5, 3 hour range. But it's hard to find the time for, just, you want to sit down for 2.5 hours and talk. It's hard to do for other people. Um, but dude, I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. It's always good to
All right,
catch up
man.
with you.
Catch you soon, sir. Talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah.